Why can't you just stop? Let's talk about addiction. Hello, my name is Ramon Phipps with The Detail, and today we're going to be looking at the topic of addiction. Addiction is one of my favorite topics. Not only do I have lived experience, but I also dedicate my work and my life to helping people find their greatest self in this life, and sometimes they have to overcome the hurdle of addiction. So let's look at it first from its psychological and biological focus. We know that addiction is now a disease. It's a disease that has to do with our choice making, however. The human brain in itself is always going to be susceptible to conditioning. And when we engage in repetitive actions over and over again, we are going to find ourselves either dependent on these things or, of course, way too familiar with them. Sometimes that dependency and familiarity can lead to habitual, compulsive decision making, which, of course, will result in our actions. What addiction is defined as is our desire to want to continue negative behaviors over and over and over again while knowing that we are causing detriments to other areas of our life, being our finances, our physical health, our mental and emotional health, our relationships, our life at work. We cause detriments to all of these areas, and we know that, yet we still continue the behavioral pattern. This is why addiction in the past was seen as a moral failing, but no one wants to fuck their life up using a drug, or gambling too much, or engaging in excessive exercise or overeating. No one wants to mess themselves up. We're driven by pleasure in this overall mentality. And if that's the case, then it's hardly our fault. It's just our biology that's overwhelming us. We are conditioned to do things. We are conditioned to adapt. We are conditioned to experience neuroplasticity, which is going to lead to more and more repetitive behaviors over and over and over again. This is what makes a human being. We are not that difficult. We're just essentially a mathematical machine, or just programming. But at the end of it all, we only see the behaviors. And when we observe the behaviors of what addiction is, this is what affects our world and our communities and our societies. Addiction is commonly seen as that junkie on the street, or that alcoholic father who's always hot in their temper, or that person who's fucked their life up over and over and over again, putting shit up their nose. That is not only what addiction is. Those are just caricatures of what addiction can look like. I've worked with people who are millionaires, very successful, to homeless individuals, and everywhere in between, from young to old. Addiction has no face. And the scary thing about it is, if we don't know what really leads us there in the first place, then we can be just as susceptible to addiction. Because again, it's just us falling prey to our biological conditioning, the things that have to do with our dopamine reward system that drives us towards wants, desires of engulfing ourselves in pleasure. Addiction is sometimes called a family disease, or I like to expand it to a community disease, because sometimes the world around us, in fact, 60% of our environment is what influences addictive tendencies in the first place, such as growing up in a family where you were around a lot of alcoholics. Or maybe it is something that has to do with a hereditary predisposition, like when people inherit lower serotonin neurotransmitters from a depressed mother or depressed father. These things could lead to a predisposition towards depression in that child. It's very complicated and complex around the biology, but the environment is pretty easy to see. People who might not have a lot of choices or options in life, or maybe somebody who has way too much choices and options in life, will always latch on to pleasure. I mean, these things are what drives us. They're what makes us feel good. They're the reason why we want more and more and more. And when we engulf ourselves in these things, we always start off with a bit of curiosity, which is the first stage of addiction. Casual. Most people are going to start off with that very casual use, that one drink at the dinner table, or maybe that one line at a party from time to time, or being able to do one pill, one this, one that, one joint, whatever it may be. We don't want to, of course, mess up our lives. So we just start off being the casual user, but eventually this leads into a dependency. And the dependencies where things get a little bit tricky, because there are two types of dependencies. the physical dependency and the psychological dependency. The psychological dependency always comes first, and the physical dependency is just an after effect, but it makes things a lot more difficult. A physical dependency would be like when your body gets used to alcohol, gets used to opioids, get used to doing something, and when you stop it, then your body actually can't function without it, so you need to use it in order for you to feel normal. But the psychological dependency, again, you need to commit to this behavior, you need to commit to this action, you need to commit to the use of the substance over and over in order for you to feel normal. But the way that you get to that point in the first place is you conditioning yourself into habit and routine. I need a tall boy right after a long day of work. I need a line in order for me to feel more confident at this party. I need a joint in order to de-stress or heck, even find my spirituality. I need this, I need that. And these needs are not necessarily needs. They start off as wants first because we see a reward and benefit after the use of them. However, that want and that reward, we start to need to chase, because that's how your brain is just wired, conditioning over and over and over again. Ourself to, of course, seek this reward. That's all your brain wants. It sees things in black and white, just like that, and it wants to feel good. And when our psychology falls prey to our wants, that's when our body falls prey to our wants as well. And we then may slip into addiction. Addiction is just when you are committed to the behaviors over and over and over again, causing detriments to other areas of your life. And again, you know you're doing this. You know you don't want to do it, but you know it has a hold of you and you can't stop. Because addiction is what leads us to lying, what leads us to cheating, what leads us to omitting information and other forms of manipulation, what leads us into these obsessive thinking patterns and compulsive behavioral habits that we just can't seem to break. Addiction is a categorization of our behaviors. It has nothing really to do with stigmas, with bad moral failings, or anything of that sort. It just is the behaviors that everyone sees. So then judgment now defines addiction. No, your biology, your environment defines what can leave you predisposed to addiction. Your choices, what leads you deeper into addiction. After that's said and done, your ability to, of course, overcome these things is all based on a want and a will more than anything else. Imagine that, creating this hole in your life and then needing to dig yourself up. This is why sometimes the transition from addiction to recovery is so difficult. The things that drove us to wanting to use substances in the first place or wanting to engage in certain behaviors in the first place are always going to be deeply personal, such as maybe we needed a drug like alcohol to cope with an emotional pain at some point in our life. Or maybe we needed something such as sex and intimacy in order for us to feel higher self-esteem and validation. Maybe we needed that line to make us more productive at work because we had to bring money home, and without it, there would have been no income. Maybe we needed these things or thought that we needed these things. Like gambling even. Maybe we needed that rush because my life was so boring and I'm tired of the monotony. Maybe I needed to, of course, sell myself in order to get that quick fix because my body was failing me and I felt like I was losing my mind. Maybe you needed these things or thought you needed them, but in the past it was just a poor choice that led to poor coping and poor decision making. A quick fix, naturally anybody will go towards a quick fix, but that's what makes the transition from addiction to recovery so difficult, because what am I supposed to do now as the addict is what I ask myself. And even though my will tells me that I gotta be there right now for my kids, I gotta be here right now because I don't want to fuck my life up anymore, I gotta be there right now because I promised to stop. Even though you know that you gotta do these things, it still becomes hard because now we're working against this wiring, this conditioning that we've committed to for weeks, months, years, decades on end. And now it's like a daily battle over and over again. Now we have to confront everything that we ran away from for such a long period of time, our traumas, our stresses, our anxieties, our insecurities, our fears of the world around us and the world within. Now we have to actually practice acceptance and ride out our waves. And if you've always had an easy button, why would you do it any other way? There is no other way, however. Addiction and recovery go hand in hand with each other because it's about connection. In addiction, you connect to something outside of yourself in order to feel validation, in order to feel security, in order to feel like you can escape, in order to feel sane, in order to feel stable. In recovery, you're connecting with something outside of yourself. But the reasons for those connections outside must come from understandings within. If I understand my pain and I choose to connect to a therapist in order to talk about it, that's me now connecting to something better, something healthier, something that's going to be positive, impactful, and create a long-lasting change for myself. But it's hard to talk about my problems at first. That's what makes this whole process so difficult. It's like a hurdle, big hurdle that we have to climb over. And this big imaginary hurdle almost feels like a boulder up and down a hill, over and over and over again, like the myth of Sisyphus, only to start right back at square one, because these pains, these emotions, these feelings are so unfamiliar, but that's eventually what creates our long-term change. Choosing to accept that it's all there, embrace it, and then working on it. We sometimes can do this through mindfulness meditation, and this is why a lot of people that go through the phase of addiction, if they go into an education in treatment programs to overcome addiction, one of the small ways that they're going to help themselves overcome a lot of stresses is to practice deep breathing exercises. I do a multitude of these practices on my channel here. You can view any of my deep breathing exercises or my guided meditations, which are a great way for you to introspectively observe yourself so that you can become more familiar with the pains and the anxieties and the fears and the stresses that create a dysfunctional world for you. And instead of using a substance or a behavior to escape from it, you allow yourself to just work within it. Small steps forward, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And even though it may be difficult right now, it does get easier tomorrow. There are so many different quotes from addiction, the world of addiction and the world of recovery. They're beautiful and inspiring, and I wish I could throw all of them into this video. I just want to leave you with one. Socrates: a life unexamined is a life that is not worth living. Ponder on that. This has been Ramon Phipps with The Detail. I hope that we got a small little bit of information from this small lesson today. I really enjoyed talking about this topic, and if you want me to go even more in depth regarding the science, regarding the effect on our communities, regarding recovery, I can explore any of these topics in depth. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for more.